Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Development Diaries. This is a show where we interview leaders, innovators, change makers, movers and shakers from across the real estate development sector, learning about their career journeys, proudest moments, lessons learned along the way, and advice to their younger you. We also find out what excites them most about the real estate sector right now. I'm your host, John Guest, founder of Henry James Search and the Rebels Community, a group of good humans in real estate who come together to move the industry forward and challenge the status quo. On this episode of Development Diaries, I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Harding-Roots, Regional Managing Director for the South at Muse, formerly Managing Director of London at the Crown Estate and Board Member and Exec Director for Major Projects at Grosvenor. Simon, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Good morning, John.
Good to have you with us. So we like to start on Development Diaries by talking a little bit about your earlier career journey and how you got into this wonderful world of real estate development in the first place. So, Simon, was it written in the stars, or was there a sliding doors moment along the way that brought you here?
A few sliding doors moments. I think ultimately more by luck than judgment in terms of how I started off. I suppose what came through from way back in the day, my school days, in terms of my early studies, the main subject I excelled in, or two, I suppose, was geography and economics. And I wasn't really much good at anything else, but those two I really enjoyed. And that saying, sort of, you're good at what you like and what you enjoy doing, held true from sort of pretty early on. So it's always human geography with the economic slant to it. So that was quite deeply rooted from early on, but I had absolutely no idea what I would do with that. I knew quite early on I didn't want to be a geography or an economics teacher, that was for sure. No disrespect to them, they are incredible in what they do, but it wasn't me. And really my sliding doors moment, I suppose, was when I worked for a temping agency. So I was just doing temping work in school holidays as I finished up my A levels. And I lived in Surrey, and I got an opportunity to go and work on a temp basis in Elmbridge Borough Council. And it happened to be in the planning department, knew nothing about planning whatsoever. But that was it. That was like, God, this is really interesting. And I sort of a bit perversely showed a lot of interest in it again, because I really enjoyed it. And not many people did, bluntly, in terms of who I was working alongside. It was very much a day job for them to pay the bills, as it were. But I was really enjoying the whole broader context of what planning was. It opened up a whole new world to me in terms of there are councils that plan the urban form, or the towns and villages we live in. And I thought that was really interesting. It did start to tie in, of course, with my geography and studies around planning and bringing the Planning Act into the UK. I enjoyed even things like, because it was Elmbridge, there were a few celebrities dotted around the borough. It's a relatively wealthy borough, so you could sort of bone up on what Cliff Richard had done to his house and St George's Hill and various others. So there was a bit of fun to it. I was on the public counter, so people would come in and ask my opinion as an 18-year-old whether they'd be likely to get planning consent for their single-story rear extension type of stuff. So I thought it was really fun. I think because I showed interest in it, enjoyed it. I went back numerous times, actually got to know the chief exec quite well, just again, because I think I showed interest. So that was really it. That was my sort of eye-open, like, wow, this is actually something I could do for my career.
And I love those sliding doors moments, thinking about what would have happened if that temping agency hadn't called you that day. I wonder if they know what you've gone on to achieve and how good a placement that was, actually.
Yeah, I wonder. Interesting. Yeah.
Having spent a lot of my life in Elmbridge, I can imagine, working in the most pro-development council as well, everything got approved. There was
Very much.
no local opposition or anything like that.
Which, again, was a nice environment to work in. It was very positive. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. Sometimes has a reputation for being one of the toughest. So I'm glad that you made stuff happen. And so from that point onwards, getting the temping role in the council, how did you engineer the transition from that point into later spending time in development?
So it was really then about what would I do at university, and I definitely didn't want to drop the geography / economics bit. It was still what I wanted to study. So I was doing geography. I did geography at university, human geography at university, but then decided, again, working regularly back in Elmbridge when I was home in the holidays. But then decided, yeah, planning in one shape or form was going to be for me. But I wasn't quite there on an RTPI planning route, a very pure route. I wanted more of I suppose, the economics and the commercial side to be part of it. And then sort of had my eyes opened but to the RICS and their planning and development option route. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's probably what it's going to be about. I was also very keen to be, my sort of younger self was very much wanting to be a professional. I wanted to have a bit of a brand, a bit of a sort of a qualification, a badge that meant something rather than just a degree. So I was always very keen to know what that would be. And I thought, RICS, yeah, that's probably going to do it. Even though I was doing a non-cognate degree, as they're called, with geography, just a pure subject. So when I left university, I needed to find somebody that would take a non-cognate, back in about 91, that was. And fortunately, there were still a few, not many, because the economy wasn't very strong. So they were tending to play it safe and go with people who had done the RICS degree. But Drivers Jonas, this was another sort of trigger moment, I suppose, in my career in terms of enabling it to take the shape it has. So Drivers Jonas were taking non-cognates, and I was fortunate to get taken on by them in their consulting division, which is strategic planning and development advice across the country. So that was brilliant, and I loved it. I was, again, fortunate in that I was mainly working with the chairman of the board, Rex Mercer, who was really influential in those early days of my career, and had some great clients and nutty planning problems. But it was driving value from planning solutions. Commercial value is what I enjoyed.
And it feels like they're one of those businesses, of which there's several, that are always thought of fondly, that have launched the careers of a number of people across the industry today. So fair play to them for, interviewing for potential and behaviours and giving people a chance. I think that the industry's better for it. Have you ever thought about, if you didn't end up in development or didn't follow that path, what you might have done instead?
I have, and I think it still would have been property related. And with this professional badge I wanted, I also did some work experience at Broadway Malin, the architects, because they were in Weybridge, which is pretty close to where I lived. And again, had a brilliant experience with them. They did master planning as part of their study, their involvement with clients, their offer to clients. And so I think that's probably where I would have gone. I would have gone more of the architectural design route as master planner, through an architectural side. But that would have been obviously a long slog. I think it's incredible and impressive the amount of time that people put into becoming professional architects.
Well, it's pleasing that it kind of hooked you so early, really, and that actually it always would have been something to do with creating places. Um, no, do think this could be a whole other podcast, but not sure if everyone at a similar point in time is so clear on what they want to do, to be honest. And maybe it's because they don't have the exposure to the real world when they're in education like you did, but certainly something, this podcast included, or something that we all need to do better, is educate people on all of the good parts that career paths that our industry can bring. So fast forwarding through your career, it's taken you all over the globe. You've been to the Middle East, you've been to the Far East, you've been back to the UK working for Imperial, Grosvenor, Crown Estate, and now Muse. Could you share with the listeners some of your career highlights on that journey and what you feel are your proudest achievements to date?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been completely formative in terms of that international side of what I did. And I always knew I wanted to work overseas. I was born in South Africa. My parents split up, and my dad was in the Middle East for many years, so I'd visit him in the holidays. So I was bunged on a plane at the age of 10. So it was always something that was part of my life. It was never scary. From a very early age. And I love the UK, love Britain, but I always knew I wanted more, and that ultimately I'd come back, but I knew I'd wanted to work overseas. So that was quite deeply rooted. So after I'd done sort of 9 years in surveying for Drivers Jonas and Fuller Pizer, as were at the time, in this planning and development role, the next personal realization, I suppose, was the fact I'm a little bit allergic to being, despite wanting professional qualification, but to being badged or pigeonholed. And I realized you do become, and some people it's very suitable for them, but becoming a development planning and development surveyor meant that's what I did. And I found that it was going to be hard to break out of that. I wanted to be broader and not just do that element. I wanted to cover the whole spectrum of planning right through to operation, development obviously in between. And so what I realized is the best way to do that is to go overseas, where it's a little bit less rigid as a profession. And this was back in '97. And back then, this opportunity at the back of the paper, hard copy Estates Gazette, as it was, where the jobs would be advertised. There was this job for this company called Majid Al Futtaim, based in Dubai. No one had ever heard of Majid Al Futtaim, let alone Dubai, pretty much in those days. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. The Middle East was, as I say, relatively familiar to me, although it was Saudi, which back then again was very, very different. So I thought, well, I'll chuck my hat in the ring for this. That moved incredibly fast. I was actually living with my long-term girlfriend at the time. Didn't even mention that I'd applied for it because I thought it might be a bit tricky and it probably wasn't going to happen. Sure enough, we came back from some holidays. There were loads of messages on the answer phone again, as that shows the time it was, saying we want you out in Dubai for an interview, and that moved very fast. My life changed dramatically. And I was there within 3 months, getting off a plane in August in Dubai. Temperature was well into the 40s. Knew nobody. Thought, wow, this is incredible. My personal life changed as well. So ended the relationship, went out to do this, and it was just so exciting. I was like, wow. It was one of those, again, moments where you think, it's me who's in control of my life here. I'm doing this. I've done this. I've made it happen. I can't quite believe I'm here, but here I am. And I suppose that's something I'd really encourage people. We get a bit safe in our wanting to be a bit safe in our lives, and I think they're too short. I mean, if you're up for a bit of adventure, go for it. Because a lot of my friends at the time were saying, "Oh yeah, that's brilliant, that's really exciting. We'll do that in a few years," and they've never done it because they've ended up inevitably getting married, having children, and then it's almost impossible, which it isn't, but in their view. So, I was quite chuffed with myself. I was pretty petrified, but always thought, well, I can just get on a plane and come home. If it's that bad, I'll just go back and I'll find a job back in London. So again, I think it's backing yourself a bit in these opportunities. And I just to sidetrack slightly, because the Middle East has been for a while pretty consistently, but very much back on again. Dubai definitely, Saudi of course, very much back on the agenda, doing these mega projects. And initially, you could, and I do sometimes think, oh, I'm not sure about Saudi. Morally, is that right? And I think, again, you've just got to take your view, take a view on it. And if it's your career you want to progress and you think you're going to make things better, go for it, because it's such a great opportunity to work at scale like that. And that was sort of what Dubai was like back in the late '90s. Massive scale projects, plenty of money, people wanted development, infrastructure was being built everywhere. And I never looked back. I was with Majid Al Futtaim for 8 years. It's the longest I've done with a single company. And again, it was absolutely brilliant. Loved it.
That sounds like you were pretty brave, and as you said, followed the opportunity, and it's paid you back in spades. So there's probably some advice there for those listening that are further back in their career to heed. What about, since returning to the UK? You've worked in some amazing roles in landed estates, now institutions, now working for a developer in Muse, which we'll come back to. But what have been some of your proudest career achievements since you've been back?
I think, well, actually, they're from those times overseas, really. And what it did is it just to clarify that point, it brought me out of my pigeonhole, if you like, as a development surveyor and put me into a client side development role, which got all the master plan viability, got all the consents in place, developed it out, and then operated it. The full spectrum is what that company does right across the Middle East now. And so that was massively jumping into the deep end. And I suppose just on that, what that enabled me to do was, I mean, I often say this to people in my teams now, is that just because you haven't done something doesn't mean you can't do it. And I just think, again, that's such an important thing for people to have in mind, because it's all too easy for employers as well as employees to say, well, you haven't done this before. And I almost quite like being asked that, because I've got really good pushback on comments like that. I think it's very suffocating if that's how people live their lives. So I'm all for trying new stuff and seeing what happens. And I suppose in terms of a proud achievement, that would be back into Dubai in the late 90s, where it's a bit weird, but it's where I built a major shopping centre, one of the first ones in the heart of Dubai, Deira City Centre. And it is, people say, well, and that it's quite old school. Back in the day, it was a dumbbell with an anchor and everything else. But what it created was a place for people to gather, because it's such a hostile environment, with the extreme temperatures. It meant locals and expats could gather in air-conditioned environment. They could stroll, they could promenade, do the things we do up and down our high streets, grab a coffee, go to the cinema. Visitors could come and stay at the hotel that we then built. We built service departments. So again, it's creating that diversity of tenure, if you like, and ability for people to take part in it. Early days, but that was creating place without really knowing it. And now I look back, I think that was a meaningful contribution to Dubai, and I'm pretty proud of that. So that was good. And then went on to do more of that in Bahrain and in China, and got married, had kids on the way through all of that. So personal life obviously carries on, which is fortunate. And luckily my family were very happy to move around. I married a lady who's Arab, as well, so culturally I immersed myself in that. But then it was to that point where I've been away for nearly 15 years, and it's sort of one of those junctions, isn't it, where kids are getting to be about sort of 8 and 9 years old. Do we actually go back and do the education back in the UK? And so we did do that. My wife had never lived in the UK, neither had my kids, so that was a huge step for them. Which was sort of not without event, but settled really well back up in London. And then I worked briefly on Battersea Power Station. So the company I was last with in China was Treasury Holdings, and the UK arm owned at the time Battersea. I thought that sounded good. It was taking over the big sort of master plan delivery of that scheme. Unfortunately, they went into administration soon afterwards. So once again, one of those crossroads in the career where, so what do I do here? They said, why don't you stay? We're going to be taken over, as we know, by the Malaysians who were funding it. But then, oddly, I got approached by 2 universities to go help them with their master planning and expansion, as well as running the university, Imperial College and Cambridge. And I was like, well, that's not bad. Really interesting. 2 come along like buses. Interviewed with both. I really liked Imperial. Not that I didn't like Cambridge, but it was a broader role at Imperial. And again, back to just because you haven't doesn't mean you can't. That was COO for Imperial College, and I started the interview process thinking I'll be dropped out of this at some point, and wasn't. Incredibly lengthy interview process, as you'd imagine. And I ended up there, and I was like, again, pinching myself, like, how on earth has this happened? But how exciting to be part of this incredible global institution in very much a support role, which I was really proud about. I'm not a leading academic solving the world's important problems, but I could help them, with the infrastructure and the efficiency of how they were going about it. So that was incredible. I had a team of over 700 people. Again, like, never had to manage that many people and those sorts of issues. But just a fascinating part of the career. What that then did is got me really interested in estates, because in effect I was running a big complicated estate partly, clearly, as most people would know, in South Kensington, but also big expansion out at in White City, West London, where there's now a big campus developing out there. So it's initiating a lot of that. We had a nuclear facility out in Berkshire, and we ran all the student accommodation ourselves, so thousands of beds, something else I managed. So just very complex and diverse, but fascinating. And as I say, that got me into the estate, thinking about estates and the benefit you have when you have something at scale and you control all of it, um, is unique, really, as an opportunity. And so that's why I ended up at Grosvenor after Imperial, which was much more back to my roots as a property developer person, but for an estate, which I loved, absolutely loved it. It enables you to do things that you can't if you're doing plot by plot. You just have a long-term vision, and you can invest in that, and the value you add by creating broader place is to your benefit, but equally it's to others' benefit.
At Henry James, we focus on bringing a transparent and data-driven process to the opaque world of executive search. We combine best-in-class traditional headhunting with modern attraction materials so that we can commit to working on each search until it's complete. Executive search in property, done properly. If you haven't already, please do connect with us directly on LinkedIn, and you can follow our Henry James Search page there. And you can find out more about the business in general at henryjamessearch.com. I think it's pretty relevant in today's market, where you're also able to lean on some of the value add for the place next door from the place that you're developing, and create a place. So maybe that's where the industry, and I'm pleased to see it's become a lot more collaborative in the time that I've been in it, but there's still a lot of work to be done in working together to achieve, win-win. You mentioned the shopping centre as one of your proudest achievements in Dubai, and creating a place that people could have a good experience. That's got to be one of the biggest, most exciting parts of being in our sector, and forms part of everyone's legacy. So if we can all do more of that, then everyone surely wins. You've probably shared some of the answer to this already, Simon, in terms of advice. And I think for those listening, navigating their career choices, probably taken some real value from some of the steps that you've taken. But you talked about being brave, you talked about putting your hand up. All of it is music to my ears when it comes to hiring for behaviours rather than just a CV. And it's a drum that I will bang until they cart me off and do something else. Looking at the potential of someone, and some of the best hires actually being slightly underqualified for the role, but 100% willing, rather than the other way around. But we won't get too much into that today. What would your advice be to your younger you, looking back now, on top of what you've already shared?
I think it is just going with that gut, and again, gut is kind of a bit unfashionable these days. People are a bit nervous about gut and instinct. I just push back on that. It's served me really well, and I say this regularly, and I get that we have to be very careful about bias, and that's quite right. But your gut and your instinct will tell you a lot, and also to always have in the back of your mind, what's the worst that could happen. The what ifs, if you like, get there first, and so what if this, and there's too many what ifs. It's just so easy to just put things off, especially big difficult decisions. But to on the other side of that, what's the worst that could happen, and just rationalizing it a bit, I think is really helpful for people, perhaps. And again, it's just thinking forward a bit. And so the planner in me, I do plan out the future. And if you sort of think, oh, I'll do it in a few years, just be realistic with yourself. You can have other pressures, you're going to have commitments. Would it really happen? And maybe it isn't that important to you, and we can't all charge off to go and work around overseas, but it was so meaningful for me personally as well as professionally. Culturally, what you learn, what you pick up from dealing with somebody, a local person in Dubai versus a local person in Shanghai, or even Bahrain, the subtleties of all of that I just find fascinating. And it's good, I think, for Brits to have the edges knocked off them a little bit. We can be, and I'd say we can be in the property industry as well, a bit a bit opinionated, a bit arrogant, a bit full of ourselves. I used to see people in China, I won't name the company names, but big names would all know, turning up, sort of blinking in the Chinese smog, sort of like, well, this is how we do it in England, this is how we do it in London, and it just lead balloon. I mean, that's just not how you do business, and bluntly, it's pretty disrespectful. But you see it happening, and it wasn't just the Brits; it was the Americans as well. You know, it was a lot of these international businesses, and they didn't last. They'd last a few years, and then they'd be back. So, you know, again, that sort of thing is quite eye-opening, and I hope as a person I've been rounded by that.
And I guess giving you a wider lens on human behaviour as a whole, coming back to London, which is very metropolitan, multicultural, accepting city. I personally believe it's one of the best in the world. But it's not just full of British people. So understanding how ecosystems work in other places must only help you when you're thinking about the places of tomorrow. And I think the piece around gut is very interesting in a world now where we have information overload, there's access to so many people's opinions. It must be harder to form that gut feeling earlier and have conviction on it. Whereas actually, I think all of that makes it more important. I do tend to find it something that people do feel more comfortable developing and listening to later in their career than earlier. And I don't think some of that probably helps with that, but I think it's really good advice to take. So if your gut is telling you something, you're probably going to get it right more than wrong.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And it kind of makes life a bit exciting as well. I think that the transition of coming back was quite interesting because you can argue, well, quite rightly, that none of the countries I worked in were actually democracies. And democracy and what we stand for here is a fundamental belief of mine. So, I made what I wanted to out of it. I think I gave plenty of myself to them as well. Then coming back and sort of dealing with democracy, which bluntly frustrates a lot of us because we can't do things at the sort of pace we might want to. If you think about planning, government and things that you can't control, and it can be very frustrating. But that sort of brings you through to, well, how do I make, it's the right thing, and involving communities, and people say, like, people have a right to say things. So how do you engage so that you get the best out of everything? And that was a big lesson, always learning course when I came back, especially at Grosvenor, also at Imperial, but building relationships in local government and national government when I was at the Crown, and definitely with local communities, how fundamental it is to engage people. And you have to go with that. You have to flex out of your Dubai and China mode where you just crack on and get stuff done, which is great fun. It's just a different way of doing things, but it really reinforced the same message from being overseas: the importance of relationships, genuine relationships, people you trust and they trust you. It runs pretty deep.
With the benefit of all of your experience, having worked with a number of people in real estate development in various roles, countries, asset classes, specialisms, what do you think are the core traits that make an exceptional development professional, and what are the skills most needed when we think about building our teams?
And what I'm delighted to see is how the development industry has evolved over the decades I've been in it. So what it needs and is getting far more now is some agility and some flexibility, and to listen more than speaking. The developers, if you like, of old, the pinstripe double-breasted suit brigade, there was that arrogance. I've mentioned it before. We know best. This is how we do it. Very money driven. Other stuff gets in the way. Planners, local residents. Again, touching on what I've just been through. You would try and block them out of fast track stuff because it was all about the bottom line. And of course, it's always about the bottom line. Otherwise, development's not going to be sustainable long term. So let's not kid ourselves. We have to get a return. But it's has far more breadth and diversity in its approach now, which I absolutely love. And watching the younger members of my team throughout, in terms of, they get that, and of course sustainability and social inclusion and these fundamental aspects which were never even there before, they're just deeply embedded. And I love seeing that as part of the profession, having evolved, and therefore needing to and having to partner with many others. breaking down those traditional silos of, well, I'm a developer, I do this, you're a project manager, you do that. And it just can't work like that, thankfully. So, that is great. And I'm a massive backer of partnerships at whatever level, however formally or informally. Again, it's back to relationships and making sure we're doing the right thing. So I think it's moved really positively. Still got a way to go, but most of the dinosaurs are extinct now and have died out, which is great. So we're backing a good group of younger people now.
Yeah, and as the industry becomes more collaborative, some will self-select out, becomes more operationally intense as well. It's a whole different type of platform and business to build, maybe than just purely development. So collaboration, being a social chameleon, we talk about a lot. Someone that can understand, have empathy for the different people in the joint venture or the supply chain or the different decision makers involved in bringing a project forward. Those are all skills that are definitely more important than they've ever been before. And as we look forward into the market, so we record this in November 2025. We'll touch on your new role at Muse shortly, but as a kind of wider market, so putting Muse and what you're doing to one side, what do you think are the biggest opportunities in the market over the next 5 years? We know there's some challenges. We know it's not the easiest and most straightforward, but there's plenty of stories out there about that. So we'll kind of push that to one side. Where do you think the opportunities lie, given what we said?
I think there's enormous opportunity out there. I think it's staring at us in the face in most places where we live. We have struggling town centres. We have redundant former industrial sites coming through. We have a lot of, in effect, brownfield sites, assets, opportunities that are there. I really think as an industry we need to concentrate on sorting that mess out. So I'm a bit old school about Greenbelt, and I like to get into debate about, is Greenbelt still relevant? And most people these days seem to think not, and that grey belt and everything else we could be building on. It was brought in for a fundamental reason to prevent coalescence of areas, of urban areas, and it's done its job. And until we have rectified our derelict sites and all this vacant land within towns and cities, I just do not see how we can justify reclaiming, and well, not reclaiming, developing over green land. And it's not about love for the newts per se, but it's just, that's something you never get back. And like, why should we? We should be far more disciplined in focusing on regenerating spaces, bringing people together. People want to live in cities. So my view is the natural will is there. People want good infrastructure. They want to live near their work or live near where they play or live near where they study. So make that as easy as possible. Invest in the infrastructure, and that will help stimulate that growth and regeneration. So my passion is still regen, absolutely, driven by what the needs are of the time. At the moment, it's housing, but it will also be employment and office space. Despite a few years ago, our office being completely out of fashion, it isn't. People want to come together to work and collaborate. Back to that human factor. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. It hinges on partnering. Developers can't do it on their own. Local councils can't do it on their own. Numerous other parties involved, and people are starting to realise that. And so the coming together is starting to happen, which is really exciting because it pays off.
Yeah, and I don't think you'll find many people that argue that again, collaboration word, working together, bringing together skill sets or land and skills and creating those together for putting those together to create a win-win. Don't think you'll find many people that argue that's fundamentally key to unlocking housing in the little bit of a mess that we find ourselves in now, if I can say that. And maybe that segues nicely into the new role, which you took up earlier this year as the regional MD for the South at Muse, a business that I know does a lot of work in this area. So maybe now is a good time for me to ask you about the plans for the business. What are you most excited about at Muse? What are the priorities, and what should we expect to see from your camp over the next couple of years?
Yeah, no, great. I mean, I'm delighted to have joined them. It plays right into my passion in terms of, as I've said, regeneration and delivering it, not just talking about it or planning it. They I sort of am narrowing back down from broader operational roles. Again, at Crown Estate, I had a very broad operational role, a lot of property management of an existing estate, team of 200 people. This is bringing me right back to my core passion of actually delivering regeneration where it's needed. And that's what I love about Muse. I also love the fact it's proven itself in the Northwest. It's very well known. The company Muse is very well known up there with Salford and Stockport and other major regeneration schemes that are delivered and highly successful, transformational. So I'm really proud to be part of that. The southern region is slightly less well known, although we've done some great schemes in Lewisham and Bow and Canning Town. But it's about how do we now bring on the south to do some really meaningful, impactful stuff. I love our relationship, our tried and tested and genuine relationship in partnering. We have a long-term relationship with English Cities Fund, ECF, which is ourselves, Homes England and Legal and General. Very powerful. That unlocks opportunities that if you're just a developer going in on your own won't. So there's grant money there as well as private sector through Legal and General and ourselves. So there's genuine partnerships there. We work really well with local authorities, got a great reputation with them. We've got several other joint ventures that we've set up around the country. And that's back to this point about if you're going to get stuff done, that's the model, that's the way you'll do it. And it's been really clear. We don't do large housing schemes, that others do that. We're not promoting ourselves as a house builder. Muse, very uncomplicated, is mixed use, use. So that's what we're all about. It's often quite housing dominant at the moment, but we are able to turn out schemes of 50% affordable homes, genuinely capital AH affordable homes. We've just done it in Bow, and that again is it's what people need. And they were filling up. The council Newham were filling them up within days of them being handed over. So you hear sometimes they sit there for months while they faff around trying to work out who's going in. They were straight in. People were in there. Families were in there, transforming their lives. So doing that as part of urban regeneration, activating spaces, it's really exciting. It's great. It's what I love.
And what would you, if this podcast were to go and land on the desks of every head of council across the southeast, head of planning departments, I'm sure they know they have a role to play, and I'm sure there's probably lots of reasons that they'd like to do more of it, but maybe feel that they can't. What do you think your message to them would be, and what's the one thing that they could improve or spend time on to make more of these things get into progress over the next couple of years, do you think?
I think it's continuing to work on the trust. It goes both ways, and I think the developer of old thing, and we can't trust you, and you're just out for the money. We've got to drop all of that sort of stuff. We've just got to be really upfront. We've got to show the maths, as we say in our business. Let's just get the numbers on the table. This is what we want. This is what you need. This is what we need as a return on investment. You need homes. You need some return on your land. Obviously, you need some value. Let's see what comes out, and then let's work out how we make it happen. And I think the more open councils can be and less political around this sort of thing, the more genuine regeneration we'll get. And we all know that's the slight problem with our political cycle. We're going through it all again at the moment with local councils, local elections. There's a lot of disruption out there. I just hope all politicians of all colours can look beyond that, because we all know we've got a genuine housing crisis on our hands and we need affordable homes, as well as preserving people's jobs and opportunities and welfare and everything else. So it shouldn't be political. And I think if we can get past that and just build these relationships, whatever colour, we'll go a long way.
Yeah, I'm thinking a bit more longer term.
Exactly.
As you say, whether it's me that's going to still be in this seat to be able to carry it through, at least, maybe seeing it a bit more like a relay race than a 400 meters. I might run 2 or 3 of the legs, hopefully, but actually, if I don't, at least I've started something that will go on to be a legacy that I can take my own kids to in the future.
Absolutely. And that's for both sides. So that would either be very much me at this stage in my career, but also for local authorities getting beyond the politics. It's like, if you genuinely care about your residents, and I genuinely care about the people we're trying to help, you won't do it all yourself. And again, because of the scale of what we're trying to do, it's long term, inevitably 15, 20, 25-year program. So nobody involved today will be involved, highly likely, when it's actually done and the ribbons are being cut. But how exciting to have been an instigator around that, and to be able to say I was part of setting that up.
And creating a place that people enjoy spending time in.
Absolutely.
Pride in the city, pride in the town, pride in the village, somewhere that people don't move. They spend their money with local businesses. They're part of the community. And I think that genuinely that sense of fulfillment and being a part of something is what drives a lot of human behavior. In a world where AI and technology are coming along at pace and are threatening to take away some of that, I can only see it being, again, as I said earlier, more important to spend time with other real humans in places that foster that connection.
Totally agree. So, and the other thing that's happening as part of the evolution of what we do, we don't just build houses for sale or council homes, social homes. We now have these various asset classes, of course, with purpose-built student accommodation, we're built to rent, with co-living, as well as the more traditional, and that all really helps unlock viability, but also bring in a diverse range of local people. So it should be diverse range of tenures, because people, to your point, if they want to be in an area for many years, their circumstances will change, and they might start off renting a really small studio, but ultimately want to buy something. Enable them to do that, provide the product, and that's becoming more sophisticated, as we know. They're much more recognized as asset classes, and that's great. I mean, that all feeds into genuine regeneration for the sort of stuff people need.
And that, I get that empathy piece we talked about that makes an exceptional development professional. Some of those that I've seen personally go on to unlock projects quicker, sign Section 106s quicker, get their scheme through the planning system quicker, are equally those that are put in the hard yards to have the most meetings with local bodies, schools, councils, foster support, understand what they'd like in a scheme in their place, and make sure that it's seen as a positive. It's not the big bad developer coming and taking away something that might be a little bit run down, but we kind of love. Is actually creating a better version of that, which will impact the lives of my family, my kids, future generations, and all the people I care about. It's kind of gone hand in hand, and maybe it's quite obvious, but are we doing enough of it?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, and I think I do like the fact placemaking is used as a term quite frequently now. A few years ago it was all public realm, which used to make me cringe, because that's kind of like planters and paviors, and it's very plot by plot. And I think if people genuinely believe in placemaking and the integration of broader communities, and making them long-term safe, inclusive, diverse places, then that's what it's all about. And I do think that's landing really well, and people get it. It's in everyone's interest, and that's a great time. So with all the negativity around us pretty much all the time, I genuinely think there's a better understanding of what it's about and how we create great places. And Muse is brilliant at it, which is why I've joined them. But there are others out there who understand the importance of it, as well as local authorities, people like Homes England, and people with big remits.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what you all go on to achieve. It's tradition on this show to answer a question from the guest before, Simon. So that, in this case, was Harry Nibb from Oxford Properties, who kindly left you a question which we've titled the optimism question. So he answered a question called the hammer question. We decided we call this one the optimism question. So the question was around the fact that we're all very good at focusing on the negatives rather than the positives. And as an industry, along the lines of what we've been talking about, we definitely need to all play a part in changing the narrative. So his question to you, Simon, was, what is your vision for the future that makes you really, really happy and optimistic? And what are you doing to make sure that we achieve those things within our cities?
Well, it's a good question for me, because I am the born optimist. I'm definitely the glass half full. We were going through our team insights yesterday, and it's Simon's all about coming with solutions and good news stories. Obviously, that's not always possible, but that's my personal preference. And I sort of alluded through our chat, in terms of I do think we're actually in quite a good place. We know that we've got viability challenges. It's hard, and everybody's saying, "Oh my goodness, it's hard. How are we ever going to do it?" but we're far clearer in terms of what the opportunities are. And back to my brownfield focus, I think we've got opportunity there staring us in the face. We should grasp it. We should do it in partnership. People get partnerships now. There's more and more of that. And the ability to really change things in the coming decade, I think, is really, really phenomenal. We are making stuff work. We are bridging viability gaps because the government has recognised they need to help that with the likes of people like Homes England, who have got significant funding. They know they need to provide housing. 1.5 million is a big target, but it's setting us off on the right pathway. So I think that infrastructure investment always gets everybody up in angst, but we are investing in our infrastructure. The Elizabeth line now, everybody, despite all the moaning and the budget and the programme, a bit like the Channel Tunnel way back in the day, it's just phenomenal infrastructure. It's opening up this east-west corridor in London, like places like Slough, where we're really active, and Stevenage. You get into the heart of London within 20 minutes. The opportunities infrastructure is creating is enormous, and we must keep investing in that to unlock the potential of our urban areas. And I think we've got it. I think the message is there, and I am genuinely optimistic that we can get through current viability economic issues together and make things happen.
Well, good. And yeah, we need more positivity, as we said. So we need more people like you out there talking to these people, getting them excited, telling them it can happen. Otherwise, we just end up in an echo chamber of doom, don't we? And probably not in that inspiring for anyone to go the hard yards, which I think are essential in the.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when I'm out and about, I do, especially in public events, I do push back when people just want to spend a whole hour talking about, oh my God, viability, and we can't do anything, because there's no point. I mean, we need to get past that. Of course there are viability challenges. It's back to the solutions point. I'm very driven by solutions rather than we can't do it.
And I get asked every day, how's the market? Which, is a question I'm grateful to be asked, because I'm not sure I have all the answers, but through the lens that I see, there are some that are finding it challenging. There are others that are using those challenges to their advantage. And if you bring forward a scheme where there's going to be less supply, that's where people have historically always won. The saying of the smooth sea never made a skillful sailor is very true. If everything was easy, everyone would be doing it, and therefore it'd be harder to stand out. So I think it's important to capture some of those challenges and see them as a positive as well, because on the other side, you'll be more adept to deal with whatever comes your way. And I think your career is a really good example of that, putting yourself out there, dealing with different jurisdictions, getting into different businesses, navigating your way through lots of different challenges. So hopefully people have taken some learning from there too. So as a reward for answering Harry's question, you get to leave on for the next guest. Not knowing who that'll be yet. So what would you like to ask them, Simon?
Well, I suppose sort of back to the viability point, and the event, the Chancellor's budget that's coming up next week. I thought, even though it would have happened then, if you were Chancellor with pretty unlimited remit, what would you do to completely reorientate and refocus the property industry and the broader economy, but a specific focus on real estate?
Wow, that's a great question, and very timely. And actually, I think one for the listeners to ponder as well, because it's very easy for us to give our opinion. Go and watch professional sport, and we say what better. If they turn the microphone over to us, we might be met with a little bit of tumbleweed. So, if we can't come up with some of the solutions ourselves, then we're being a little bit hypocritical. So I'll ask the next guest for their answer and keep you posted. But thank you for joining us again today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Had a fascinating career. Really excited to see what you go on to achieve in this new role with the team there, and around the world of public-private partnerships. So thank you, Simon, and we'll catch up soon.
Brilliant, John. Really enjoyed it. Good to chat to you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Your support means the world. Please feel free to like, share, or pass the podcast on to a friend or colleague. Do drop me a line with any suggested topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, and recommendations of guests that you would love to see us interview. Till next time, go well.